Nobody sets out to make a bad movie. And yet, it happens. A lot. Especially with sequels. Hollywood can't resist going back to the well when a movie captures an audience and makes a lot of money. But again and again, sequels disappoint, and in some cases can be so bad that they kill a franchise. So join the great pop culture debate as it focuses on the most dreadful of duds, the most creatively bankrupt of flops, as we discuss the worst movie sequels. I have visions that a great white shark is hunting my family, hell-bent on revenge. And you know what? Team Shark. I'm your host, Eric Resniak. Please welcome my panel of film critics for this episode. First, activate your bat skates because he's back and robbing the bracket. It's Jim Zadzik.
Stay cool, Eric.
Nice. And just to dispel the awkwardness, these bat nipples are built into my costume, but it is still ice to see you, Jim. Next, much like Catherine Trammell, our next panelist is a mystery novelist who follows her basic instincts. But her are less about sex and murder and more about snuggling kittens. It's Kate Rakulia.
Uncross his legs. Would you like to see my pussy? No, really, my cat is right here.
Oh, and finally, he will be your girl for all seasons. It's Kevin Dillon.
Put your stamen to the test. Reproduction.
Folks, if Kevin shows you his pink lady, and he might, just make sure you deploy some grease too. And up in the producer booth, we have Bob Erlenbeck spinning his web, but he's been a real jerk ever since he encountered that sentient black goo. If you're curious about how we ended up with this Sour 16, become a Patreon supporter of our show or listen to the 3-minute primer available wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, you can head to this episode on greatpopculturedebate.com to find the listener bracket as well as clips of all the nominated films so you can play along with us at home. And with that out of the way, grab your Rotten Tomatoes and let's get into these debates. First up, the majority of the panel wants to book the opposite of a pleasure cruise by voyaging into round 2 with ultimate number 1 seed, Speed 2, Cruise Control. But Kate has been waiting forever to discuss her feelings about 4-seed Highlander 2, The Quickening. I will go down with the ship and Speed 2, while Kate will argue that there can only be one, and it should be The Quickening. Kate, please go first.
So, look, the OG Highlander is an absolute hoot. I find it just more entertaining than it has any right to be. It's super over the top, great Queen songs. Sean Connery is Spanish? Sure. It makes no sense, but it's nothing compared to Highlander 2, The Quickening, which literally throws away the entire mythology about what Highlanders even are, makes them aliens. Sure, Sean Connery is still Spanish, and he got $3.5 million for 9 days of work. Beginning of a theme, people do these shitty movies for money.
Yep.
Totally cursed production. They made it in Argentina when the country's economy completely crashed, just as they were starting the film, causing the film's bonding company to take over production, rewrite scenes to be cheaper, fire the director. Michael Ironside, Christopher Lambert literally hurt each other with 20-pound swords. This is a direct quote from Wikipedia. John C. McGinley made his character's voice as deep as possible in an effort to sound like Orson Welles. He has since admitted that this was a bad idea. It does. So this movie takes place in like a dystopian 1999, something about the ozone layer, and then it flashes forward 25 years in the future to 2024, which is kind of neat. Hey, future listeners, it's 2024 right now. It's the cursed year when Highlander 2, The Quickening is supposed to take place. This movie's trash. I'm actually going to flip over to Cruise Control because it's even worse.
Awesome. So I was going to ask if she has swayed anybody. Kevin, are you sticking with Speed 2 here?
I surely am.
Excellent. Jim, you sticking with Speed 2?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to point out was kind of another theme that I think is going to come out is one of my metrics was a number of people who were disappointed by showing up and seeing it. And this is probably one of the lower ones on the box office.
Yeah.
I personally wasn't someone who was into Highlander 1, and so why would I ever see Highlander 2? It doesn't have the bigger impact. I think the bigger impact is getting a bunch of people really excited to show up for this movie like Speed 2, that you love the first one, you want to see it again, but maybe not exactly the same movie again.
And I will say I did the research on this. Highlander 2 is one of only 2 films on this list with a 0 tomato meter on Rotten Tomatoes. One of only 2.
What's the other one?
We'll get there.
Okay.
To answer your question, Jim, this is also one of the very few war sequels to make more money than the original did. It made 15.6, whereas the original Highlander made 12.9.
Woo!
Yeah.
So it's
fun
successful.
Sign.
Party.
That being said, Highlander 2 is out and we're moving Speed 2 into the next round.
There can be only one.
In a battle of terrible sports-themed sequel movies, it's another 3-1 split, this time in favor of 3-seed Space Jam: A New Legacy, which the bulk of the panel thinks is a bigger foul compared to 2-seed Caddyshack 2. Kevin, tell us why it's a slam dunk. Space Jam 2 is by far the worst film. Jim, or should I call you Mrs. Esterhaus, give it a teeny tiny tap as you try to sink this putt in favor of Caddyshack 2. Jim, please go first.
Now, I probably will switch too, but I wanted to give some attention to this. Again, it's another theme we're going to talk about a lot, where people showed up wanting to see like something in the same like style of the original, something that might be have a lot of the same stars come back. And this just had production nightmares. I think it actually originated from Rodney Dangerfield wanting to come back, and then he eventually backed out, and other people backed out, and other people came in, and Chevy Chase got paid a ton of money for like a very short kind of almost cameo.
Yep,
ton of money.
And yeah,
Ton of money for a cameo.
And he didn't do a lot of that, and he didn't do a lot of acting in it.
No, he did
no.
not.
Now, as a kid, I remember liking it, but it was because it had like a funny what is it, a woodchuck or something that's
woodchuck,
getting
yeah.
blown up. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, but that's not what the original movie was, you know. And so and then everything else was trying to like replace the same kind of character with a new character that had the same character traits. So you have a lot of recycled plot devices as well. You know, I wanted to give it its time, but I also know Space Jam is, boy, that maybe upset even more people who pushed play on it.
Yeah.
So this is a podcast that cares about detail. It's a gopher.
Thank you.
Okay. See, I couldn't. Thank you. I knew I was wrong.
That's why you listen to the Great Pop Culture Debate. This level of
accuracy.
research.
And that
Yes.
gopher's name was Ann Wilson.
Kevin, has he swayed you? Are you sticking with Space Jam: A New Legacy?
I'm sorry, I just can't vote. I can't vote Diane Cannon for it. She's just too important. So I think Space Jam 2 is also worse, because I had to turn it off in the last 20 minutes.
I don't blame you. It's dreadful.
It's just dreadful.
Kate, are you still with Space Jam 2?
And with Space Jam 2, it is a dreadful film. Dreadful.
Yeah. I'll say this. I rewatched Caddyshack 2 for this. I don't hate it. Don't hate it. I understand everything you said. Everything you said is right, Jim. Every bit of it. And the fact that it was Rodney Dangerfield, who was probably supposed to be that lead character, and not Jackie Mason, who can never carry a movie ever in his life. Like, what? But I don't hate it. There are actually some funny parts. That being said, we're moving Space Jam: A New Legacy into round 2. Next, it's a unanimous decision as 1 seed Jaws the Revenge leapt from the water and roared like a lion as it devoured the votes instead of 4 seed Halloween Kills, which means evil dies tonight. But before Michael Myers goes back to the grave, Kevin wanted to take a stab at this sequel. Kevin, take it away.
I stabbed, metaphorically, David Gordon Green in the Patreon, so please listen to that. I think my problem with a lot of these modern horror movies, and a lot of them seem to be made by David Gordon Green, a la the most recent Exorcist, and there has his influence.
Right.
And it's awful. Oh, that movie's so bad. I think ultimately, like, these movies want to try and say something deeper. And I think The Omen was actually a little more straightforward in what story it was telling. And I think that's the problem with this Halloween trilogy, is he was trying to make it about, like, surviving and being a victim and being moved through that. And it's like, evil dies tonight. And I'm like, the only thing it gave me was Kyle Richards in a movie again. And that I'm all here for. Other than that, bye.
But he couldn't even kill Kyle Richards.
No.
Like, you had one job.
No one can, unless, actually, sorry, Big Cath can.
That's
Big
true.
Cath can kill. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Well, that being said, we are going to move Jaws the Revenge into round 2. Next, the majority of the panel wants to keep mind fucking and literally fucking with 3 seed Basic Instinct 2. But Jim is cursed to be the odd man out again, as he thinks 2 seed Teen Wolf 2 is worse. Kevin, work that puss and make sure Basic Instinct 2 kills the competition. Jim, put the I can in lycanthrope as you argue for why Teen Wolf 2 is worse. Jim, please go first.
Oh, all right. Well, again, similar theme we're going to hear a lot about, of the idea that it's kind of the same movie, but a slight change. This time it's boxing instead of basketball. You know, Jason Bateman's in it. There's not too much that stands out except for its nearly identical plot. It's less charm, weaker performances. You don't have that, you know, maybe some of that star power, even though he becomes a pretty good star coming later on. And that's, you know, I again wanted to give it its time, but you guys are all against me with the Basic Instinct 2.
We are, and I'm not going to budge on that one. Kate, are you with Basic Instinct 2 still?
I absolutely am. But Teen Wolf 2, they're in college, right? That's the difference.
Yes.
That's the change. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I remember about that movie is that there's a montage later where he's like getting his shit together, and it's like before the final whatever. And there's this scene in the montage where it's like he's like studying with his college girlfriend. They look at each other and they're like, okay, study break for sex. Okay, that's weird.
As one does, as a werewolf American. Yeah.
I was like, college is okay.
Yeah.
It's college.
Kevin, are you sticking with Basic Instinct too?
Oh, for the bangs alone, Eric. For the bangs alone.
I was going to say, I don't know who had worse hair prosthetics, the werewolf and Teen Wolf 2 or fucking Sharon Stone in that movie.
It's her own hair person. It's her own hair person. Go on IMDb and it says Sharon Stone's personal hair person.
That person hated her.
Yeah,
and I think we need to tell the truth. We need to tell the truth. All right, so we will be moving Basic Instinct into round 2. Next, it's an even split between Fever Dream, or Is That Fever Nightmare, sequels, Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, a 1 seed, and Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, a 4 seed.
Imagine these two crazy kids getting together.
Well, just wait for it. Kevin, engage in cinema's least suggestive orgy as you push for votes for Blair Witch. I will troll for Tricks in Satan's Alley. Hey, that's my old Grindr screen name. As I push for votes for Staying Alive. Real talk, I think this could be a final 2 for this whole goddamn bracket.
It sure is. It sure is.
These films are odious. Stink, stunk. It's especially bad because the original films for both are critically beloved and were massively successful. Staying Alive, if you haven't seen it, is the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, with John Travolta returning as Tony Manero, who has ditched disco in Brooklyn for musical theater in Manhattan. Gone is the grit and the complicated characters, replaced by extended Broadway dance sequences and leotards. But retained from the original is the breathtaking misogyny. The crux of the story is Tony, hell-bent on becoming a Broadway star. On his way to success, he repeatedly dogs his long-suffering girlfriend, played by Cynthia Rhodes of Dirty Dancing and Flashdance fame. She had a lane. And either fights or fucks Broadway ingenue of the moment, played by Finola Hughes in her first and last big screen leading role. Travolta and Hughes are both deeply unlikable in these roles. I mean deeply unlikable. Mm-hmm. It all climaxes at the opening night of their show, Satan's Alley, which is exactly as subtle as you would expect an 80s Broadway interpretation of hell to be, including the gayest outfits by Bob Mackie that he's ever created. And you guys, that's really saying something. If you've never watched this movie, at the very least, please go look up the extended dance sequences on YouTube, which were brought to you by copious amounts of cocaine. Yep. The film is directed by Sylvester Stallone, known for uber masculine fare like Rocky and Rambo, but this is so queer-coded, it made me feel butch. I mentioned there were 2 films on this bracket that had 0 tomato ratings. Staying Alive is the other one. Oh. There you go. It's also the oldest film with that distinction in the entirety of Rotten Tomatoes, and Entertainment Weekly named it the worst sequel ever made. But that being said, Kevin, why don't you talk to us about Blair Witch
2? Yeah. So to be fair, like if you want, and I'll talk about this later, I'm a big Letterboxd person, and I created a little chart of my worst sequels, and these are at the bottom 2. These are literally the last 2 on the list. And what distinguishes it for me, and I will start with that, is I think the original of one is far superior than the original of the other. And I'm saying that Blair Witch is a much better movie than Saturday Night Fever. I think Saturday Night Fever is a 3-star movie. Blair Witch is like a 4, 4.5, 5-star movie to me. And what I will start with is by saying that the original Blair Witch was literally iconic. People talked about that movie in a way that is like, I don't think I've seen magnanimously recreated ever again since that happened. Like the buzz and the expectation of seeing that movie in a theater was just so crazy. It started at Sundance. It's one of the it's got a whole chapter in this book around how good film in 1999 is. Go visit our episode on 1999. We talk very highly of the Blair Witch. But now I'm going to talk about how shitty the sequel is, because who the fuck is this Burn Notice motherfucker back on my TV? Why did I have to see him again? Ugh! Him and the rest of the cast are so boring, lifeless, unengaging. Nothing happens in this movie, and I couldn't explain an ounce of the story. Nothing logically makes sense even like them going into the lore of people who were obsessed with the original and tried to figure things out is lifeless. There is not an ounce of creativity, thoughtfulness, or anything in this movie. And for me, the distinction of the two is I'm gonna fucking go back when I'm stoned as hell one night and watch that Satan's Alley dance number. I am absolutely never, you could not pay me to watch Blair Witch 2 again, because even the horny was boring. And when horny is boring, you lost me. And the horny and Staying Alive was damn hot.
It was a great point.
Yeah.
These are really good arguments. Jim, where are you on this one? Are you with Blair Witch or are you with Staying Alive?
I am torn because Eric, you made a really good argument, but I felt the pain of Blair Witch in the theater, and so I identify more with that. But also with Blair Witch, there's the question of like, what did you expect? Like, there was a gimmick, and how were they gonna? Like, I guess I did go in hoping that they did something else really innovative. Yeah. And that's not what that was.
No.
It was like, hey, we got our big break. We can make like a horror movie that is this. So I guess I'll stick with Blair Witch.
Okay, Kate, are you with Staying Alive or Blair Witch?
I'm with Staying Alive. One of my rubrics was a mathematical equation, the absolute value of the difference between the first movie and the sequel times the effort required to make the sequel. And so much effort went into Staying Alive.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's why I'm with that one.
Well, it's a split. And I have to say, Kevin swayed me, so we are going to go ahead and move Blair Witch into next round. And I think the point that I will watch Staying Alive again for the camp value of it, I would never watch Book of Shadows again. So Book of Shadows is in next round. Next, the majority of the panel is for Nuclear Man Proliferation, as they're voting for 3-seed Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. But Jim thinks he can pull a slick one by pushing for 2-seed Grease 2. Kevin, tell us why you're willing to go to war for The Quest for Peace. Jim, tell me more about why Grease 2 is the worst film. Jim, please go first.
Another one I'm going to lose, but Grease 2 is another example of rehash a plot. Songs are similar, but maybe minus the stars. Although, Kevin, I'd love for you to sing Reproduction again for us. It would be wonderful. Because that's the
anytime you want, Jim. Don't you worry. Anytime you want.
Just a hilarious song, right? And that's I don't know if it's aware of how. I don't know. It's kind of is it funny because it's so bad, or is it funny because they were trying? It's hard to tell. I think the absence of the stars, the weak songs and plot are reasons why I put that on there. And for Superman 4, I mean, do you hate the environmental message? Is that why you guys think it's terrible?
Yes.
Yes. Like RuPaul, I also frack.
Exactly.
Allegedly.
Great. So, Kate, has he swayed you, or are you sticking with Superman 4?
I'm sticking with Superman 4. It is, I mean, we did have a preponderance of comic book movies, but yeah, I'm sticking with Superman 4.
Kevin, are you sticking with Superman 4?
We're gonna bowl tonight. Yes, I'm sticking with Superman 4. I think Grease 2 is the best movie on this list.
Because you're a big fan of Judy Garland's less talented daughter, Lorna Luft.
Poor Lorna. Poor Lorna.
I'll just say this. I'm 100% sticking with Superman 4. It's terrible on its own merits, but weirdly, there are people out there who will tell you that Grease 2 is better than Grease. I vehemently disagree with this statement, but there are people who literally believe that.
I might be one of them.
Well, there you have it. So we will be moving Superman 4 into round 2. Next, it's another even split, this time between 4 quills that put their franchises on ice. 1-seed Batman and Robin and 4-seed Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Kate, tell us why it's not nice to mess with Mother Nature and why Batman and Robin is a worse movie. I will fly through the jungle like mutt, as I try to swing votes for Crystal Skull. Kate, please go first.
Both of these movies are such trash. Like, they're just a battle of the lowest common denominator, creatively speaking. I mean, I did have fun going to see Indiana Jones 4 in the theater in the same way that I had fun, I thought, the first time I saw The Phantom Menace. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, I didn't. But anyway, we care about details on this podcast. We care about doing the homework. I really tried to watch this again, and I just could not fucking do it. Like, it is a commercial. This movie is a commercial. Chris O'Donnell, I'm not going to have his actual quote here it perfectly, but when he was in Batman Forever as Robin, he said the first time we did that, we were making a film. This time we were making a toy commercial. They literally worked with, I think, Mattel to design Mr. Freeze's blaster before they wrote a script, right? Like the whole point of this movie, who is this movie for? This movie is for kids. To sell things. It's just it rushed into production because Batman Forever did so well. It was, at the height of just put Arnold Schwarzenegger in the role of Mr. Freeze. Nothing about the character says Arnold Schwarzenegger. Put Uma Thurman in the role of Poison Ivy and someone as Bane. It is the worst Bane.
Oh my God, don't get me started.
It is the worst Bane. It's insulting to people who actually know and like the comic books, and just like boring and puerile. And like, I remember going to see this in the theater. I was a teenager.
To be fair, some of these comic people do need to be made fun of, and I am a comic book person, so to be.
But I fully remember like sitting in the theater and the part where their like little ice skates come out and they're like doing, and I was like, this movie is bad. It's not even fun and joyful the way that like the old Adam West Batman is. It's just not an ounce of this is cool. Although I do kind of like the Smashing Pumpkin song.
Sure. So let me talk a little bit about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I'll say I actually don't hate either of these two movies. I don't. I think that they're guilty pleasures for me. I get why they're here. They were both reviled upon their release. But having revisited them both for this episode, I actually think that they're largely successful in what they're attempting to do. And yes, Kate, that was sell toys. That's what Batman and Robin was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, fair point.
So Crystal Skull is haunted by a few specific criticism. The most glaring problem with it is Shia LaBeouf as Mutt, Indiana Jones' surprise kid. Would Mutt have worked if he was played by any of the other actors that exist on this planet? I don't think so. He's unlikable, he's unbelievable, and the indisputable nadir of the film is him swinging through the rainforest on vines with a bunch of monkeys. Christ. But that brings us to problem 2 with Crystal Skull. The special effects are special. It's especially glaring because in the previous indie movies, they all included astonishing sequences that were mostly done by practical effects. But here, the VFX look cheap and fake. That ant attack comes immediately to mind. The third major criticism of the film is that aliens are silly for an Indiana Jones movie. I completely reject that premise. The indie films do a great job of reflecting the big questions or fears of society at that time. This one is set in the 50s, when sci-fi and psychics were very much part of the cultural consciousness. There's nothing more absurd about aliens crash landing on Earth than there is about, say, God's wrath being trapped in a magic gift box. The other issue people possibly have with this film is the implication that native populations of non-white people couldn't have possibly built advanced civilizations without alien interference. Not gonna touch it, except to say, hardly a thesis that this film pioneered. Overall, I think there are a bunch of successful elements of this movie. Harrison Ford is great. Wonderful to have Karen Black back on the screen. Kate Blanchett
Karen Allen. Although we stand Karen Black also.
We do, sorry. Kate Blanchett is a hoot as the bonkers villain. And personally, I think they outweigh the bad. Jim, where are you on this one?
You make some good arguments, but also I think you made some good arguments why that film might be more in the good category than the worst. I think Batman and Robin is unique, and I think we had a little bit of conversation about like why not Batman Forever, because that was there was some tonal shift there, but this was them doubling down like. No, like it's different than the Tim Burton films. We're going all the way the other direction, and it was just like offensive to the viewer to some extent because you watch Batman Forever and you're like, oh, okay, it's a new director, it's a little different, but this had no involvement from any of the previous kind of settings of the tone, and it just is so shocking. So Batman and Robin for me.
Kevin, are you going with Batman or are you going with Indiana Jones?
Every time I've watched Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I've fallen asleep. I fell asleep in the movie theater. I fell asleep at home the second time I tried to watch it, and this time I also fell asleep. I think it is boring, Dullsville, terrible. I could watch Batman and Robin on repeat multiple times. Uma Thurman is great. I love Batman and Robin. It is my second favorite movie on this list. But I have a feeling I'm outnumbered here. With that, I will say we added Batman and Robin to this list. The viewers voted for Indiana Jones. So,
That's a great point, Kevin. And with that being said, it's a tie, which means the one seed will advance here, and that's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So that moves into...
As a goodbye, I'm going to put some quotes from Arnold Schwarzenegger into the chat. Could we each take a turn in reading one of his lines?
I think we should.
Oh, can I do the first one?
You sure can.
I'm afraid my condition has left me cold to your pleas of mercy.
Kevin, do you want to take the second one?
I sure do. Eyes to see you.
Jim, you want to take 3?
Everybody chill.
You're not sending me to the cooler. And then Jim, since this was your idea, do you want to do the final one?
Let's kick some ice.
Beautiful. It was a lovely third alternate, but we will be moving Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull into round 2. Finally, in round 1, the majority of the panel doesn't like Sandman. He's coarse, he's rough, he's irritating, and he gets everywhere. Or his movie, 2-seed Spider-Man 3. But I think 3-seed Zoolander 2 is really, really ridiculously bad. Kate, don't tone down the venom as you argue for why Spider-Man 3 is the worst film. I will argue why Zoolander 2 is the inferior model. I'll go first. And here's the thing, I'm not going to attempt to sway anyone because Spider-Man 3 is bad. And it is worse because it killed a hugely successful and critically acclaimed franchise. Zoolander 1 was dumb, but fun. Zoolander 2 is just dumb. The interesting element for me watching Zoolander 2 is that it showed just how Ben Stiller really only worked at a very specific moment in pop culture. He does literally the exact same thing in this movie that he did in the first one, and yet it is boring, it's unfunny, and there's nothing charming here. There's fat shaming that kind of wraps around body positivity by the end. There's trans, non-binary panic, courtesy of Benedict Cumberbatch's completely pointless characters. There's some funny slapping of the fashion industry, courtesy some cameos from like Mark Jacobson and Wintour, but really the only highlights in this entire movie are Penelope Cruz as the secret agent from Interpol's Fashion Crimes Unit, Will Ferrell reprising his role as Mugatu, and Owen Wilson coming back as Hansel, although those last two just give us watered-down versions of the first film. It is interesting to me that they were still engaging to watch while Stiller's Derek Zoolander was not. But that being said, have I swayed anyone? Kate, are you sticking with Spider-Man 3?
I gotta stick with Spidey 3, man. What a trash heap.
Jim, Spider-Man 3?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know who was asking for Zoolander 2, but people were looking forward to Spider-Man 3.
I was asking for Zoolander 2 and I still hated it. Kevin?
You had me at Topher Grace.
Oh my God, he's so bad in this movie. All right, so Spider-Man 3 will continue into round 2, and that's the end of round 1. We're going to take a quick break to bang our psychiatrist who has secretly been using us as cover for a murder spree. It happens. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hey there. If you're enjoying this episode of the Great Pop Culture Debate, and I sure hope you are, we would love for you to consider supporting the show on Patreon. Patreon sponsorships start at $5 a month and include loads of great perks, including access to our super active Discord server, exclusive episodes, and warm-ups you won't hear anywhere else. And at the $10 level or higher, your own GPCD tote bag, which is only fitting, as this is basically our version of an NPR pledge drive. We can only produce this show with your support, so please consider heading to patreon.com/greatpopculturedebate and joining us today.
And we are back for round 2 of our worst sequel film debate. Before we get into the Elite Eight, I want our panelists to share their social media accounts and what else they're working on. Jim, where can people find you? What are you working on?
I'm still on Twitter at JCZAD, looking for a new friend that is not Twitter, but that's where it is right now. And not doing much. I got a new job, so I'm not doing anything creative at the moment. Other than this, yeah. We're also, we're trying Threads, but oh my God, we get 0 engagement. Kate, where are you? What else are you working on?
I am on Instagram, although not really, but you could come and see old pictures of my cats at Gomez Rack. And I'm not really working on anything right now. I'm just LIVIN. Living.
Love that. Love that for you. You're living, you're laughing. You're
loving.
Even loving. Yeah, you're doing it. Kevin, where can people find you? What else are you working on?
Well, as I said to Lady Freeze when I pulled her plug, this is a one-woman show. I'm not working on anything. And for this film episode, I'll say my Letterboxd. You can find me on Letterboxd at Avenger234.
Great. You can find me at Eric Resniak on Instagram, or just message at Great Pop Culture Debate on Insta, Threads, or TikTok, or at GPCD on Mastodon. But what you really need to do right now is to sign up for our weekly newsletter, which comes out every Tuesday at noon, telling you about everything new in pop culture that week. Sign up by finding the link on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com or via our our link tree on any of our social media accounts. It's time for our Patreon shout out. This one is to Ryan Andersiglio, who has been a Patreon supporter since we started in 2020 and who I made watch most of these terrible movies. I'm so sorry. If you would like to get a shout out on a future episode, become a Patreon supporter by finding the link on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com. Now let's move into round 2 so we can use Chex Notes Diamonds to Chex Notes Freeze Gotham, which will somehow Chex Notes help save our frozen wife. Who writes this stuff? First up, the panel is split between 1 seed Speed 2 Cruise Control and 3 seed Space Jam A New Legacy. God help us. Kevin, apply some leeches to your body for absolutely no reason, and then continue blowing up the reputation of Speed 2. Kate, tell us why voting against the double dribble of Space Jam's New Legacy is just loony. Kevin, please go first.
I'm going to start by saying I think Speed 1 is possibly the best action movie of the 90s, or like definitely in a top 5.
Very much up there.
Yeah, like it's in there, and like that movie was so good and had so much charm, and it was a surprise, and it was so kinetic, and Bullock and Reeves are great. Like, there's just so much. And the supporting cast, Jeff Daniels. Yeah, the, like, surprise look of death on his face is one of the, wildest story plots. Like, it's a cool movie for a very, straightforward and simple premise. Speed 2 has no premise. Unclear what we're doing here. You lose Keanu Reeves, and you get Jason Patrick's cute, but he's no Keanu Reeves. And you get a script that writes Sandra Bullock's character as awful and unlikable, and I've never disliked her in a movie. I've never thought she was bad in a movie. She was bad in this. I thought she was better in Love Potion #9 than this movie, and that is saying something. This movie is weird. The supporting cast makes no impact at all, except for that young deaf girl who is actually pretty good in the movie, but then you have Willem Dafoe doing, as you said, weird stuff with leeches, and he invented the technology, and we're gonna crash the ship into the island. It just is illogical nonsense, and it is one of the worst movies on this list, and I can't believe I had to watch it on a train. And the person next to me said, "I'm sorry."
That's how you know it's bad.
Yep.
Thank you, Kevin. Kate, talk to us about Space Jam: A New Legacy.
So Space Jam: A New Legacy, I will tip my hand and say I was too old to have a nostalgic fondness for Space Jam OG, original recipe. But I understand there are people who absolutely love it, and I respect them. So Space Jam 2: A New Legacy is not really a sequel. It's kind of a requel. It's not set in outer space, which of the Space Jam is set in a digital world in cyberspace, and it's not Michael Jordan, it's LeBron James having to prove he's a good dad by getting sucked into an AI simulation by Don Cheadle with a dumb name, and there are Looney Tunes in 3-dimensional animation playing basketball. This movie is, I feel like I'm glitching.
Which is appropriate given the topic.
Yeah, it's just witless and stupid, and it's not funny. It's hybrid animation, so there's some 2D, there's some 3D. At some points, LeBron's animated, which is occasionally impressive, but mostly it just looks like junk. A.A. Dowd in the AV Club referred to a quote as glittering CGI trash heap of cameos, pat life lessons, and stale internet catchphrases. The first Space Jam was also a commercial, right? For the NBA, for your Warner Brothers store. Media has just metastasized in the intervening 25 years that this is what a new commercial looks like. It's just as blasting at your eyeballs all of the things that Warner Brother owns. So you get all these weird references and IP things that are it's just garbage. It's a garbage movie, and it does not have Seal singing a great cover of Fly Like an Eagle.
Thank you. That's a very important differentiator here.
Yes.
Jim, are you with Space Jam: A New Legacy or Speed 2?
Not having the nostalgia like Kate mentioned for Space Jam. Another one I wasn't personally asking for a sequel. I don't know how many people were. And what they got is what you would expect from them trying to push out something. But Speed 2 is just the cruise control. It in the title it tells you it's going to be cruising. That's action packed, right? Cruising. Mm-hmm. I don't know. My vote's with Speed 2 still.
Speed 1 had 95 on the tomato meter. Speed 2 has 4. Space Jam 1 had 44. Space Jam 2, 26. a 91.
The numbers.
91
The
difference. And that's why we're going to move Speed 2 into the final four.
Very slowly.
Very slowly. It's on cruise control.
Cruising.
Exactly. Next, the majority of the panel is chumming the waters and attracting votes for 1 seed Jaws the Revenge. But Kate can't shake her urge to keep pushing for 3 seed Basic Instinct 2. Kate, can you write a shocking twist and swing the votes for Instinct 2? I will explain why this time it's personal. Jaws the Revenge is my pick for the worst film remaining. Kate, please go first.
Eminently swayable. Jaws the Revenge is an absolute trash classic. But Basic Instinct 2, I just really wanted to get a chance to talk about it. It's a weird movie. It's a weird movie. One of my rubrics was like, how does the sequel change your appreciation for the original? Does it make you appreciate it more? Does it taint it? And I feel like Basic Instinct 2 makes me think that Basic Instinct 1 is one of the greatest films ever made. Yeah. And I think that we lay that at the feet of Paul Verhoeven. Like, Basic Instinct 1 it's very over the top. It has so much weird stuff going on in it about Hitchcock and about cinema and about blondes and about sexual violence and all this stuff. It's wildly entertaining. It was such a big deal. And Basic Instinct 2 is like a like, it just exists. It has a great cast, like David Morrissey, Charlotte Rampling, David Thewlis, Hugh Dancy. Nothing happens. It's set in London, which is like well known for being like a very sexy town. No, it's not. No, it's not. Lie back and think of Paul Verhoeven. No, it's not. Sharon Stone actually sued the producers of Basic Instinct in 2001 when they originally announced they weren't going to make the movie, claiming that she was guaranteed at least $14 million for her commitment, whether or not the sequel happened or not. They settled by agreeing to make the movie. Arguable whether or not they should have actually settled. But Sharon did get paid $13.6 million, which is still $400,000 less than Michael Douglas was paid for the original Basic Instinct, for which she got paid $500,000.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to yell about that.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you gave us that bit of data. That's fascinating. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to talk about Jaws the Revenge. There are a few different kinds of bad that we're considering on this list. Are they blatant cash grabs? Are they creatively bankrupt? Are they boring? Are they incompetent? Ladies and gentlemen, Jaws the Revenge is all of those things and more. It was created solely because the movie studio desperately needed cash. That's literally true. The fourth Jaws film completely ignores the continuity from its predecessor. Almost none of the other films do that, except for Highlander. And it focuses on Ellen Brody, the widow of Sheriff Martin Brody, who was killed off via heart attack off screen because Roy Scheider wanted absolutely no part of this nonsense. Smart man. The movie begins with the Brody's younger son getting devoured by a shark, which Ellen is convinced is hunting her family psychically. So she does what any logical person terrified of shark attacks would do. She spends Christmas on an island in the middle of the ocean. The conceit that a great white shark never goes to the Caribbean. But surprise, this shark not only gets there for a tropical vacation, it does so in record time, traveling from the coast of New England to the surf of Bermuda in a matter of hours. Because Ellen is right. The shark is indeed hunting her family, presumably because the Brody's role in the previous Jaws films. But it should be pointed out, all the previous Jaws sharks died. They all died at the end of the movie. So what is this shark? How does it know to hunt the Brody's? Is it a relative? Is it the ghost of the shark? Is it Liam Neeson in shark form, relentless in its quest for revenge? We'll never know. We also barely see the shark in Jaws the Revenge. I would guess it's on screen for maybe 10 minutes, and it is looking rough, ladies and gentlemen, rough. I'm going to pass it over to other people because I've got a lot more I can talk about, but I hope it's going through. Jim, are you on Jaws or are you on Basic Instinct 2?
Oh, Jaws. Yeah, for all the things you said.
And we didn't even get into the worst part of it. Kevin, is it Jaws or Basic Instinct?
I wish this shark was played by Jabberjaws, because that would have been way more entertaining.
Jabba, 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 Jaws.
And the him following to the tropical vacation would have made way more sense.
Absolutely.
I do want to also just make sure that we bring up that the Basic Instinct was like one of the biggest Razzie winners of all time, or it was a big Razzie winner. And like, I don't know that we're going to talk about them again, but we should just name like the Razzies are trash and super misogynistic and talk about actresses in a very shitty way. And like, for that reason, I'm going to also vote for Jaws because Sharon Stone deserves better and Hollywood treated her poorly.
Sure did.
men. And so if you want to know exactly what we're talking about here, in my research for this, I was looking at all the Razzies that this won. And if you don't know what the Razzies are, some person just decided that they were the arbiter of taste and decided that they were going to do the anti-Oscars, celebrating bad movies, right? And at first, I'm sure it was meant to be fun and cheek and, tongue in cheek, but it became like an actual thing in the 90s. And like people reported on it. And this movie, Basic Instinct 2, won numerous Razzies, including, I kid you not, worst on-screen duo for, quote, Sharon Stone's lopsided breasts. Are you kidding me with this? How offensive is it that somebody was out there celebrating this and then Hollywood just ate it up in the entertainment press? It's disgusting. The Razzies should be abolished. Kate, were you going to say something?
No, I completely agree. And Jaws the Revenge is definitely the worst film. It should get by for introducing This Time It's Personal to the collective lexicon. But I wanted to talk about Basic Instinct.
I'm so glad we did. So Jaws will continue into the Final Four. Next, the majority of the panel isn't out of the woods in its disappointment over 1-seed Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. But Kate keeps caping for votes for 3-seed Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Jim, where did that giant tree come from overnight? And why do you think Blair Witch 2 continues to have bad juju? Kate, tell us why you think Superman 4 remains radioactive. Jim, please go first.
We can revisit all the things we were saying before, that it really did a complete 180 when from what the original, like it was a completely different film that had it still pulled from the lore, but it tried to be a psychological horror film, but it was just kind of convoluted and confusing. And so it just wasn't successful. It almost, in some ways for me, you saw the first film and thought, wow, these innovative filmmakers, they made this really new original idea that's like capturing the moment. And they had this whole campaign, promotional campaign that went along with it that really was like using that in a really unique, effective way. I wonder what they're going to do next. And they come out with this piece of crap. And it's maybe they're trying, but like maybe it kind of made me feel like, oh, maybe they weren't as innovative and amazing directors as originally thought. It kind of made me revisit the film prior and think, I don't know if that was that great.
So it's tainted the legacy of the original for you.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Kate, can you talk to us about Superman 4? Speaking of tainting of legacies.
I would be delighted to. So Superman 4, The Quest for Peace is the fourth Superman movie. It was not the original producers of the first three movies. They kind of stepped aside. The Cannon Group, Golan Globus, took this over. Infamous for being kind of like B-movie producers. And look, I love a B-movie with all my heart and soul. So this is not to denigrate that. But there's a slapdashness to this. There are huge plot holes. Things don't make sense. I don't know. There's a scene where Lois appears to understand that Clark and Superman are one and the same and says she remembers everything and then forgets and it's never discussed. Just like really weird like plot holes you can drive a truck through. And I kind of have the same question as I did for like Batman and Robin, where other than, is this a commercial? Who is this for? Is this like a cartoon to make kids feel less anxious about the nuclear arms race? I mean, noble effort, Christopher Reeves, who, I mean, this is the last time he was Superman, peerless Superman, best he'll ever wear the cape, just real mensch, like fantastic. And he was part of like writing the story, and I think was very like interested in it being about nuclear arms, and like it does get to the big Superman kind of like godlike being question, right? Of like, if there's an all-powerful being, why does bad shit keep happening? But it answers that question in the most juvenile and nonsensical way. He throws them all of the nukes in the world into the sun, and everyone patiently waits for him to pick up their nukes to throw into the sun. And meanwhile, Lex Luthor over here is like, well, if I put some DNA from his hair into a nuke and he throws it into the sun, I'll make like kind of like if he dies, he dies. Like Dolph Lundgren, like anti-Superman for him to fight. And John Cryer is there.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie.
It's the great value version of Dolph Lundgren. Kevin, where are you on this one? Is it Superman 4 or is it Blair Witch 2?
Oh, it's Blair Witch 2. That burn notice, dude, again. Oof, no, topped out. Can't do it.
These are both terrible movies. I'm going to give it to Blair Witch because at least Superman has some sequences that I still thought were kind of cute. We have to discuss, we have to wrap, but we must discuss the long fingernails of
and the sparkling with the like electricity coming out of
Oh
Nuclear
yeah,
Man.
Shantae, she stays.
She stays, honey. If you're not wearing nails, you're not doing drag, and he was doing drag, honey. All right, we will be moving Blair Witch 2 into the final four. Finally, in round 2, we have one unanimous decision as 1 seed Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull has been fractured by 3 seed Spider-Man 3. So that one is going out. And with that, we have our final four. We're going to take a quick break to run this massive cruise liner hundreds of feet ashore. We'll be right back after these messages.
Another email newsletter? God, I know. But listen, the Great Pop Culture Debate newsletter, it's actually useful. Give us 3 minutes of your lunch break, and we'll tell you all the coolest new stuff in pop culture that week. The biggest new movies in theaters, the hottest new albums about to drop, the TV shows everyone will be talking about. We bring it to you every ball. It's all thriller and no filler, and you'll also find out all the fun news from the podcast. Subscribe today at greatpopculturedebate.com/subscribe.
And we are back with the final four of our worst film sequel debate. At this point in the show, I always like to take a step back and see if it shook out the way I was expecting it to. I also like to add that at this point, no matter which option wins, or in this case, I guess loses, we are celebrating, or I guess in this case, denigrating all of the entries, and I hope nobody gets salty about what comes next. So it's 3 1 seeds and a 2 seed. I do think it's correct. I don't think Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull deserve to be a 1 seed. Frank, I just don't. Even if you don't like the movie, it's not worse than like 10 other films on this list. The other 3 are all stinkeroos, so I think they deserve to be here. And Spider-Man 3, having recently rewatched it, is dreadful. So we're going to start and do some around the horns here. Speed 2 Cruise Control, which is a 1 seed, versus Jaws the Revenge, also a 1 seed. I'm going to start with Jim. Which one are you going with?
Oh, it's a tough one. Actually, Eric, I want to hear more. You had more to say about Jaws, didn't you?
Oh, I did have more to say about Jaws. Yeah. So
I want to tune back in.
I'm so glad that you do. So, in addition to barely seeing the actual shark in Jaws, what we really spend most of the movie doing is following Ellen, and she's boring, and nobody cares about her. And I don't know why they ever thought that she would be good, except for I believe she was the wife of the studio head at the time. Oh. And so we have Lorraine Gary, who is irritating. We have her idiot son, his annoying wife, who is a terrible sculptor, by the way.
Terrible. She's so bad.
We have Michael Caine getting an easy paycheck.
Oh,
and we
easiest.
have Mario Van Peebles with truly a cringe-inducing island accent as they inevitably find themselves in the ocean again, being chased by this obsessed shark, and it all culminates in a truly stupid sequence in which they somehow shock the shark into repeatedly jumping out of the water, roaring as it does so, until Ellen rams it with the broken bow of the ship, Ursula style, leading to it inexplicably exploding. Literally exploding. The last 10 minutes of the movie were reshot on what sure seemed like a flooded soundstage to me because audiences hated the original ending so much. Spoiler, the new one sucks too. So Jim, with that being said, where are you going?
Oh, I'm with that. I just wanted to hear more about it. Jaws the Revenge.
Kate, is it Speed 2 or is it Jaws the Revenge?
So Speed is legit one of my favorite movies of all time. And one of the things I think that makes it so good is that it's compressed time. It's almost in real time, right? And Speed 2 is a movie where time just exists forever. Like Sean came home and I was like, oh, this is almost over. And there were 40 minutes of film left.
Yes, it's wild.
I was like, what is happening? So Jaws 2.
Jaws 4, you mean?
4, yes, Jaws the Revenge. This time it's personal.
This time it's personal. Kevin, it's personal. Is it Jaws or is it Speed 2?
These are both awful movies. I'm sticking with Speed 2, but man, they're both terrible.
I think at least Speed 2 has some pretty good action sequences. Not many. Most of them are terrible.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair assessment.
And Jaws, there's nothing redeemable about Jaws the Revenge.
No.
Nothing. So I'm giving it to Jaws, which means Jaws will continue into the final 2. Next, it's Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 versus Spider-Man 3. We barely talked about Spider-Man 3. It's the only 2 seed in here in this mix. Kevin, where are you on this one?
I gotta tell my Spider-Man 3 story.
Please tell it.
It's so funny. So we went to go see it opening night at midnight when movies only opened at midnight back in the day. And so it's all of my friends were so excited. We had been working at summer orientation. We're ready to see a movie. Spider-Man 3's 2's so fucking incredible. It's so amazing. We get to the like end fight sequence and my friend is like stirring in her seat. The rage is like a tea kettle. She's ready to boil over. I think something with Topher Grace happened that was ridiculous. She gets up in the middle of the theater and goes, "This movie fucking sucks. I'll be waiting for you in the car." And I will never forget that, ever.
She's not wrong.
She's not wrong. All that to say, I am going with Blair Witch 2 because I actually think it is utterly unwatchable. Like, again, you could not pay me. Maybe you could pay me $1 million to watch it again, but like, no, it's Blair Witch 2 for me.
Excellent. Kate, is it Blair Witch 2 or Spider-Man 3?
I think I have to give it to Spider-Man 3 because there's something like absolutely soulless, but at the same time, it feels like a harbinger of the way IP content will happen in superhero movies to come. Like it was wild to watch this again and be like, oh, this is like, I think it's maybe even like it's before Iron Man came out.
Oh yeah,
like,
it is 100.
It's so different. It looks, I mean, the CGI looks terrible. It looks unreal and airless and unimaginative. And all the stuff like Gwen Stacy, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Topher Grace is like a weird whatever Venom. Like all of these things are here because the studio's like, put that character in, that character in, build that universe out, put that in there. And you see, there's that beautiful sequence where like Sandman, Thomas Hayden Church, he was having a moment, is trying to put himself together, and you're like, this is what Sam Raimi was interested in. But the studio was like, I don't care. We don't care. You need to put these things in here and make this movie this giant thing, right? And it's so like that, there's something that's kind of depressing in a unique way about Spider-Man 3 for me and how it represents this like death of a great, like the first two Spider-Man movies are terrific. And then this happened, killed. And he didn't come back, Sam Raimi didn't come back until the Doctor Strange movie, which is also trash.
It is also trash.
So the only parts of this movie that aren't airless and inert are the infamous emo Spidey sequences. The rest of this movie is completely DOA.
So you mentioned that it felt like they were just putting characters in. That's exactly what it was. Yeah. Originally, it was supposed to be Vulture and it's supposed to be Sandman. And then the studio said, no, you're going to use Venom. And he's like, I don't want to use Venom. And boy, you can tell because he doesn't touch Venom until like the last 30 minutes of the film. And he's awful. Jim, are you with Spider-Man 3? Are you with Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2?
This is tough because it's like, again, like I think one of my metrics was like biggest disappointment. And I don't feel that as much with Spider-Man 3, where like Blair Witch was such a surprise. Spider-Man 3 is just like poorly done, kind of like our Superman. You know, it's the fourth one, that type of thing. So I guess I'll go with Blair Witch 2, even though they're both really, really bad.
So some data just to help folks. Blair Witch 1 had an 86 tomato, and Blair Witch 2 had a 14. Blair Witch 1 made $249 million at the box office. Blair Witch 2 made 48. Spider-Man 2 had 94 tomato meter and made $796 million.
Damn.
Spider-Man 3, buckle up kids, 63 tomato meter and made more money than Spider-Man 2. It made $896 million. That's fascinating.
Number one movie of 2007. Number one movie.
So I think right now I have Kevin's on Blair Witch.
Yep.
Jim is on Blair Witch. Kate's on Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Kate, that Spider-Man 3 is a deeply depressing watch, but so is Blair Witch 2. And at least Spider-Man 3 is not an incompetent movie, and Blair Witch 2 is fucking incompetent. It doesn't make sense. So for that reason, I'm also going to give it to Blair Witch 2, even though Spider-Man 3 does suck. Which gives us a final two of Jaws the Revenge versus Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is truly the worst film duo. I really think we nailed it. We've gotten there. We have spelunked the depths of mediocrity, and we have come to this point. So I want to start smack in the middle. Kate, is it Blair Witch 2 or is it Jaws the Revenge?
It has to be Jaws the Revenge for me.
Okay.
It has to be Jaws the Revenge.
Do you have a reason?
The shark is stalking her. Like, I'm glitching again. I think that part of it, too, is like our conception of what a bad movie is. Jaws the Revenge taught Americans about what bad movies are.
Because this time it's personal. Yeah.
But hey, Michael Caine got a swimming pool out of
He
it, so
sure
good
did.
for him.
That's good.
Actually, so a funny story on that. I was reading an interview with Michael Caine about this movie, and he's like, I'll be honest with you, I've never watched Jaws the Revenge.
Yep.
I've been told it's a terrible film. I have, however, seen the house that it built, and it is lovely. And so I think that really tells you everything. Jim, is it Blair Witch 2 or is it Jaws the Revenge?
The Saturday Night Live sketch of the Candygram.
Land Shark?
Yeah, Land Shark. That just, in my head, lives in that movie somewhere. Like, that's just part of it. So that's my vote, too, is Jaws the Revenge.
Kevin, is it Jaws the Revenge or is it Blair of Shadows? That
Blair.
is the Facts of Life spinoff. Blair of Shadows. Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows.
For me, it's Blair Witch 2. I would actually watch Jaws the Revenge again, in all honesty, because it is absurd and stupid and fun. Bad in some ways. Now, it will be a long time before it, and I will have Men in Black memory hold myself from that. So I'll pretend I've never seen it. But again, I've said this many times. I think for me, what you talked about, Kate, really resonates with me is like, it's the way in which we've seen horror movie sequels, like essentially mined for just money as opposed to create good content. And that is unfortunately a big part of that genre. And I think Blair Witch 2 represents, in all honesty, the worst aspect of taking an indie movie and trying to blockbuster it up and then really just corporatizing it in a way that absolutely doesn't work. Like, I'd rather watch the Urban Legend sequel than the Blair Witch sequel, and that is saying something.
100 Suburban Legend. Yeah,
Yes.
I live for it.
Yeah.
Actually, Jaws the Revenge is Suburban Legend now that I think of it.
Sure
Actually,
is.
So is Blair Witch 2, Suburban
Yes.
Legend.
Yes.
No, but it's funny because these are both, frankly, both of these things are exactly what we just talked about. They're both horror films that are about strip mining horror concepts into a quick cash grab.
Yep.
We haven't talked about the plot of Blair Witch 2, and that's partially because
There
I can't
isn't
tell
one.
you what it
There
is.
isn't one.
It is a solid 2 hours where I'm like, what is happening? Like, at one point, one of the characters apparently doesn't exist. Like, they mention offhand that she came from some religious family out west, and they're like, no, we never had a daughter. What's going on? Is she the witch? Is that what they're saying? And
I
then she's
still have
naked
no
and dead in a closet.
idea.
And like the footage is changed. It's really bad. It's really bad. And here's, you know what, folks? I don't do this that often.
Oh,
But we're going to do it because I can't make a choice here. I can't do it. I actually think they're both equally terrible.
I actually agree.
I agree.
I actually agree.
And I wouldn't have done that with any other final two, but both of these films are so lazy, incompetent, cash grabs. They were rushed. Blair Witch doesn't have a good cast, so it didn't waste a good cast.
That's true.
I mean, Jaws doesn't really, besides Michael Caine, like, doesn't have a good cast.
Yeah, Mario Van Peebles.
Oh, sure. That Jaws shark, Bruce, he's great. Love his work. But no, I'm going to give it a tie. I'm actually going to do it. So there you have it, folks. Our pick for the worst sequel film is a sequel. It's a twofer. It is Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, and Jaws the Revenge. Do you agree? Do you want to hurl Rotten Tomatoes at us? Tell us how you really feel by leaving a comment on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com or find us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, or Mastodon. While you're there, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you can hear about what new debates are coming soon, vote in open polls, and even decide which topics we tackle next. I want to say thank you to my panel. Let's all do this again for a creatively bankrupt, less satisfying edition for the most noble reason of all, money. And thank you for listening. If you loved what you heard, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get even more exclusive content and you get episodes a whole day early. We hope you have a good one, and remember, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion. Now, who's coming with me to Satan's Alley? Because this night is far from over.